Welcome to Alex and Annie, the Real Women of Vacation Rentals. I'm Alex.
And I'm Annie.
And we are joined today with Dana Lubner, who is the head of leadership development at Rent Responsibly. Dana, welcome to the show.
Thank you both so much for having me here.
We're such super fans and been following you for a long time. I told you I felt like I'd been stalking you for several years. So appreciate it very much that you were willing to come on the show.
I'm so glad to connect with you both and have this conversation today. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So to get started, can you just give us a little bit of background on who you are and what your role is at Rent Responsibly?
Yeah. So, oh my God, where do I start in the story? As many of us, especially in the last year, have switched hats and changed and, companies that we've worked for. Currently, my role with Rent Responsibly is, as you said, head of leadership development. So I have the honor and privilege of getting to work with local leaders within their communities who are looking to form an alliance of short-term rental hosts, operators, and stakeholders, traditionally and typically to fight for fair regulations. So it's in a community building and advocacy role. And then Rent Responsibly itself is a tool that communities can use to empower local leaders to help build local communities of alliance leaders and members that want to ensure they have an ability to short-term rent their properties down the road and in the future.
You have a lot going on there. So you actually started as a property manager. So is the property management piece of your background what brought you to want to be being so passionate about what Rent Responsibly does?
I don't think I would be doing what I'm doing for as long as I've done it if it wasn't for the property management and the firsthand experience.
Yeah.
Being in property management, without a doubt, it was, working alongside my brother with his property management company in Colorado called Effortless Rental Group. And it was when we saw that we were having regulations come that would restrict our family's ability to short-term rent in Denver and throughout the state. We realized that we needed to organize and mobilize. So ended up starting my own local group, found Rent Responsibly, met Dave, and he was like, do you want to do this as like a full-time career? So this newfound passion that I was finding as like something I really enjoyed doing became my full-time career when I joined Rent Responsibly.
Gotcha. That makes sense now. And I also just saw on your LinkedIn that you graduated from the University of New Hampshire. Are you from New Hampshire?
I am from New Hampshire.
Oh my
Me
goodness.
too.
So is Alex.
Yeah, I didn't know that you were. I'm from Manchester. Where are you from?
Oh, amazing. I'm from Durham, New Hampshire.
Okay, yeah, right where UNH is. Small
Yeah,
world.
I know,
Small
right?
world.
Who would have
Yeah.
thought?
Yep.
I've never been to
So
New Hampshire, but I have rode on my hydro on a river in New Hampshire. So that's the closest
what?
I've come. So my hydro, the hydroing machine that I have, they do live rows.
Oh,
And
yeah, yeah.
they did rows in New Hampshire. I guess it's the Connecticut River that goes
Yeah,
partially
yeah.
through New Hampshire. So that's my only touch point with New Hampshire. I was
Yeah.
just trying to be part of it. I was
used
just
to
trying to be
row
part of the group.
I used to row crew in New Hampshire in the real water.
Yeah, I
back in
rode
the
crew in the
day.
Potomac when I was in high school.
Yes.
Oh, that's
7
amazing.
degrees of separation,
I
right?
know, crazy. Yeah. So we digress.
Oh, yeah, sad stories. Yeah. Oh, well, so okay, Dana, where should we begin? I mean, you met Dave, and obviously, I mean, Dave is a very compelling person. I can see why or how he got you, or why you decided to go work for him and the team. But how has that been in the last couple of years? I feel like Rent Responsibly has been making a lot of impact and just doing some great things. But what's it been like?
Um, wow. That my response to you right now is kind of like what it's been like. It's been kind of this a lot of processing of how you manage your mental well-being when you're working in an industry that feels like it's under attack.
Sure.
It's I was doing client acquisition when I was working, so I'll back up for a second, kind of to like connect the dots here. But I was doing client acquisition when I was working with my brother. I was bringing on properties, and then when we realized that the enforcement tactics within Denver were really, really intense, and they were following people and sending them affidavits, and hosts were getting arrested for claims of falsifying their primary residence.
Wow.
I was like, oh my God, we need to like really organize a group. So we
Right.
got together with other local property managers. I told my brother, he owns the company, but I pretty much was co-running it with him, and, very much able to have some freedom and liberty with what I would spend my day to day on. I said to him, I need to be spending a portion of my time on building the local alliance here in Denver. Like, I need to spend time on meeting with council members. I needed to leave the office. Like, I needed to kind of adjust what my day-to-day duties looked like. And I share that part of the story because as we continue to mature as an industry and as operators, not only hear over and over, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when regulations are coming to you. It's not a matter of if or when, it's that they are, but what are you going to do about it? And how bad are they going to be? And what is the role that you're going to play in being able to impact the outcomes? And I think as hosts have the responsibility to be engaged within their local community or wherever their property happens to be, all operators also have that same responsibility. So property management companies, if they have staff or they themselves, should be dedicating a certain number of hours to do the work that I had to do in Denver. And whether it's like, hey, we don't have staff to be able to do this, it's a matter of dedicating resources. So it might be, a virtual assistant or donating money to the local alliance and so forth. So as my job was morphing into more of this advocate and activist in Denver, we put on a really big event called the Good Neighbor Summit. And last fall, we just hosted our 4th annual Good Neighbor Summit, where we bring the stakeholders together. We invite council, we invite our enforcement office, and really just show what it means to be a responsible operator and help hosts understand best practices and so forth. And we invited Dave Kraus, and Dave and I met. And I think it was over the celebratory dinner after that I grabbed his ID and I noticed we had the same
Mhm.
birthday. So
Oh my gosh. I love that.
once he realized he was from Boston, Mass, which when
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
when you meet other New Englanders, it's as though
Right.
same
Yep.
state.
Hmm.
And I was like, okay, so we're birthday twins and you're from Mass, I'm from New Hampshire. Like, we're fam. Like, that's fam.
Yeah,
And
totally.
we felt like we were like, brother and sister separated at birth anyway. So that was just the opening to a friendship where we kept in touch. And then the pandemic hit. And he's like, how are you managing all this? Like, what are you feeling? Because this was like at the time when all vacation rentals were wiped from our
Yeah.
calendars, and they were considered not essential lodging in Colorado. And so I was like, I don't know what I'm gonna do. And he's like, well, would you consider going full time and becoming, our first official hire with Alexa and I, and doing this and helping other leaders do all the work that you did in Denver. And I was like, wow, okay. Leaving my brother's company, I felt some guilt there because I love my brother and my family is
Yeah.
super close. But it was like, it felt like if you just listen to your gut is usually right. And I listened to my
Yeah.
gut and I was like, it's time to like do this transformation. And it felt like the beginning of the pandemic had this like, this is going to sound so woo woo, but like this portal. And I felt like there was
Right.
this opportunity of chaos to like dive into it and see like what beauty could come out of it. And so that's when I was like, okay, I'll do that. So in the beginning, we just had the 3 of us, and then we grew to 4, and now we're at 11. But as within any startup in the beginning, you do so many different of the operational elements. You wear so many
Definitely.
hats.
Yeah.
And so as we've brought on more staff, I feel like I've had the opportunity to have better work-life balance. And so I feel like I have my lane that I operate in, and I understand, that life goes on if you shut your laptop at night, and like to have
Mhm.
like all of those boundaries and guardrails so that you don't get burned out. Because what you ladies have probably seen yourself is like you pour yourself into what you're doing, and the next thing you know, you've lost any sense of like routine if you're working from
Yeah.
home.
Yeah.
And especially in advocacy never stops. And so you
Yeah.
can keep going if you don't have those brake pads intact.
Yeah. That's a
Goodness.
really good point and well taken.
Yeah.
For Annie's been working at home for a long time, but this is
Yeah.
new for me in the last couple months, and I have noticed that you know, I always go to the gym after work, or I used to, but I'm having a hard time now getting myself to leave my house. I'm like, do I go in the morning? But I really like going after work, but it's little things like that. And, you know, like I haven't left the house in the last couple of days. And then all of a
Yeah.
sudden you realize like there's things I need to do and I just haven't done them because I haven't had any reason to leave. But yeah, it's interesting and good point.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love that you said that COVID was like a portal. Because Alex and I talk about this a lot. So for the two of us, and I can just really speak for myself, COVID was the thing that was like it separated me from the pack. Like I realized at that moment, like I had done vacation rentals, I had worked for OTAs, I was working with a technology company, but I was working in a space that I loved, and I loved all the people, but there was so much uncertainty that it was just like it was sink or swim, like you
Mhm.
just really. And I remember just just like I felt like I was just paddling for my life almost every day, just trying to figure out like how are we all going to land. And what was really funny is we were actually in Colorado when they locked down, and we were in Keystone. And I remember months later hearing about all the things that kind of were happening in Colorado around advocacy when things started to open up, and like people getting really sideways about how many people were putting their units on rental.
Mhm.
And I just always felt that Colorado, all the times I had ever been, everybody was so behind rentals and the vacation industry. And so it really, really shocked me. But you take all the stuff that happened with COVID, it was kind of like this perfect storm of opportunity for people to just kind of branch out and find their place and find their way. And I think it brought a spotlight on so many different pieces of the industry that we needed attention to. We needed a voice. But I don't know that if had COVID happened, we would be having this conversation to the depth that we've been having it as of late. It's just, it just really opened up people's minds. And again, it was a portal for so much opportunity, a lot of strife, a lot of stress, a lot of uncertainty, but at the end of the day, I think there's so many more pluses that came out of it than minuses.
Mhm.
Yeah. It's like it just fast forwarded everything. It like took the speed on the conversation and like clicked it up 3 notches,
Yeah.
because all of that was coming, but I think COVID just sped up these conversations in town hall and city halls about what are we going to do about that short-term rental problem? Like the
Yeah.
conversation it wasn't not ever coming. It was just a matter of when.
When,
And
yeah.
then COVID was like, all of a sudden, as we know, like the lodging preferences changed towards spaces to spread out in places that had like were sitting on an acre and that were in the mountains, that were away from urban destinations or crowded locations. And so it shifted, it matured some destinations fast. I'd say faster than probably they would have because of the
Yeah.
pandemic. But now the pendulum is swinging the other way. So
Mhm.
it's kind of having a reconciliation. And I think that's going to happen with regulations in 2023 and 24, probably for at least the next 3 years, that
Oh, yeah.
there's a lot of policymakers that are considering some somewhat knee-jerk reactions
Yeah.
and how they want to address the short-term rental problem. It
Mhm.
really irks me hearing it like that, or the
Right.
issue. And I think that they're not looking big picture. And so they are going to see that there was an overcorrection with the way that they decided to vote and pass regulations. And that will have to have its hopefully an opportunity for a reckoning when you have new policymakers in seats with elections and so forth.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's sad that it has to get to that point though, because it's like, where I'm at in Myrtle Beach and where Annie is, I mean, very tourist destinations that, we spend a lot of money and efforts on advocacy, not just for short-term rentals, but just for hospitality in general and the importance of tourism. And, we've been fairly protected to this point, but, we still worry about the same things. And, we spend so much time showing how transparent we are, the value of tourism, how much money it brings in. I mean, what it does for not just tourism, but what it does for the area, what it contributes to schools and police and everything else and roads. And it's like, sometimes it just doesn't matter depending on who's been elected to sit in that position. So that's pretty scary. But do you feel like this year, is this going to be the year of reckoning, or do you think it's going to be a continued year of more regulations being put in place? I know Dave's been fairly optimistic that this could be a better year, but curious your thoughts.
I think Dave and I's, twinning characteristics is that we're optimists. And I think
Same.
in this, in this specific part of our industry, it's great to be optimistic, but you also have to be realistic. The work that we're doing at Rent Responsibly is specifically aiming to have better outcomes, aiming to have the tides change, aiming to create a ripple effect that other municipalities can look to communities that have done things in a way that's considered thought out, and bringing common sense's approach to the way that you can allow people to use their properties within certain parameters. And so I think this next year, I wouldn't say it's necessarily, in my opinion, going to be a reckoning, but I think advocates are becoming smarter and more strategic. I think that they're not allowing, regulations that are out of, that are not legal within higher jurisdictions or within the state preemption, or, in ways in which they might in the past. I think they're getting smarter. I think they're looking at, pursuing litigation, where in the
Yeah.
past they've said, stay away from litigation, whatever you can do, it's just going to cost you and then the community a lot of money. But we're seeing that regulations are being overturned because of
Mhm.
litigation. And I think that that is going to be a wake up call to policymakers that are thinking like, oh, we'll just pass this, but they didn't really do the due diligence to find out if it was actually legal for them
Right.
to do what they're doing. So I'm
Mhm.
hopeful in that sense.
Yeah, I'm fascinated by it, and I can just speak for Florida. So, and I'm sure you're aware of every Florida. I'm sure is probably one of the hot the hot list topics that you guys have all the time. But when the lockdown happened and things started opening up, the governor here was like, "Well, the hotels are essential. We have to let hotels open up." And we're like, "Well, that just flies in the face of everything that goes on with what is happening with COVID, like social distancing and having your own bathrooms and your own space and not touching other areas that other people touch." And I couldn't believe that we had to fight the way we did, living in a state that is so heavily vacation rentals, that there was really such a fight about it. And it was, I think at the end of the day, there was a lot of conversation, and there had always been within Florida, like, well, is the hotel lobby like behind this? And
Right.
is
Yeah.
who's behind this? And I think, it could go either way, but really at the end of the day, it's all about education. And it's about people understanding, one, the value of what vacation rentals in general brings to any destination, but what the business is all about and what good operators are. And yeah, there's always going to be one bad apple in every bunch. I mean, there's just no way to avoid it. But to start to make these regulations in Florida got really crazy about it, I think, for a while, where it was just like, well, we heard about something that happened way down the road. We don't know who these people are. And it was almost like they heard it like in the grocery store, like someone talking, and they decided, okay, we've got to put this regulation in so that something doesn't happen. And so I saw a lot of it in Florida. And it just, again, I've been doing this since the late 90s, and having had a property management company, I'm so thankful I wasn't in it when this regulation topic was just like, you have to manage through it, because managing vacation rentals is hard enough as it is. But to think that you throw this into it and you don't have the bandwidth, because it's generally a small team trying to operate it. And then you've got owners that are out of state that don't know what's going on, and they're hearing things from all over the place.
Mhm.
Managing through regulations and the conversation and the talking points, and just really understanding the nuances of how to navigate within your community. I mean, I think that that's what, at least in my conversations with Dave, is like, that's what you guys really try to do, is bring everybody that has a stake in it to the table to say, like, let's discuss this. Like, let's not just have everybody, relegated to their tribes and making decisions. It's like, we all need to be working together.
Yeah. And it's not a matter of like winning or losing. It's a matter of like, what is a compromise? Where is there common ground to find a path that's actually going to be sustainable to move forwards? Because
Right.
if you try to ban short-term rentals, they're just going to go underground oftentimes. And if you
Right.
try to not take in, input from all stakeholders, you're not going to find something that everyone can kind of say, okay, that was good enough. I'm content enough with these outcomes. I can agree to this. I think one of the challenges, and you mentioned like there's going to be a bad apple in every bunch. There was an article that Matt Landau sent to me yesterday, and it was about a company in Austin, Texas, and they create these really like super Instagrammable, like hot, sexy, fun, kind of like bachelorette party style properties, and they're in the middle of
Mhm.
residential neighborhoods.
Mm.
Oh,
And
wow.
um, it was a long article, and I read it,
Yeah.
and I was like, I'm really uncomfortable reading this. Like,
Yeah.
this is actually really painful for me because
Yeah.
I'm so distraught hearing that the person who's kind of being the main character of the article is living next door and in the neighborhood where these homes are being bought up by this company that is an LLC, and creating these experiences. And anytime I hear a story like that at public comment, or within an article like this, you always have to take it with a grain of salt and say, hey, is this a small percentage, or is this a larger swath of
Right.
the hosts? So we
Right.
all know this is not a representation of the large majority of hosts. But for the neighbor that lives on that street, that's
It's
100%.
everything. Absolutely.
100% of what they know of hosts. And so it's moments like that where I really get excited about working with local communities and how they can approach operators like that and bring people into more awareness, and to say, let's think about the bigger picture of this community here. And that's the kind of behavior that, or the business model personally that I'm not a fan of. I don't believe in creating that kind of experience right in the middle of the neighborhood. I think there's a certain way of doing it. And I don't know if I have thought out well enough to say what I am okay with and what I'm not here right now, but
Yeah.
that is painful for me to hear. And it's like one of those things where, I think what Rent Responsibly is trying to do is help local communities be able to address behavior like that, raise the standards, help there be better outcomes, not have all the public headlines in the news showcase operators like that in Austin, because we
Mhm.
know that is just one operator that's creating
Yeah.
one experience, and there's a lot of people that are creating other experiences. But to think that somebody that has a full-time job, happens to have a property they short-term rent, or they're a property manager, and they're just trying to run their business, as you said, Annie, it's a really hard business, never mind throwing in fighting for fair
Right.
regulations into the mix.
Yeah.
And so that's what Rent Responsibly does. Like, we kind of become, the wind beneath your wings, so to speak, and
Mhm.
like add fuel to your
Yeah.
tank so you can
Yeah.
actually still do your job. And we have a lot of plug and play resources that allow you to say, okay, if we need to get in the news, this is what we do. If we need to sit down with policymakers, this is what we do. If I have to give public testimony, this is what I can do. And then how do we do education and events so we can bring the community together and elevate best practices? So that's a lot of the work we do. So we make it easier for advocates that just in reality, their plates are already too full.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's interesting and a good explanation of it. Something else that I wanted to ask you about. I know there's been a lot of talk about what the relationship is between Rent Responsibly and VRMA. And, VRMA obviously has the Advocacy Council. And from my understanding, there is a good relationship, and the two organizations are working together, but some people don't feel that way. But can you speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we do have a partnership with the VRMA. It was announced a handful of months ago. And, the VRMA is a national organization that has the ability to raise funds through the Advocacy Fund, the Right to Rent program. And those funds can be used towards, allowing local alliances to apply for grant money, whether it's for hiring a PR firm or wanting to get an economic impact study. Both of you know all this, but just sharing for any listeners
Yeah.
that don't know. And that's not what Rent Responsibly does. So we're working with local leaders, helping local communities like hand in hand stand up a local alliance. We
Mhm.
oftentimes will advise the local leaders we work with, hey, if you guys are wanting to do a study, or if you need funds to launch a PR campaign, you should apply to the VRMA for the Advocacy Fund grant. And yes, encouraging memberships to the VRMA as well. So I look at the VRMA as this kind of umbrella, so to speak, where these local alliances are more at that local level that are doing, trying to affect change and with policy that's going to be written at the city or the town or the municipality level. Um,
Mhm.
for both. VRMA care is, bigger than just advocacy. There's a lot of other areas in which the VRMA focuses on. So naturally, we have advocacy as a strong arm of the support that we provide to the community. So there is some overlap in resources and so forth, but I don't think, by any means that's, more than we need by,
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
more people out
Yeah.
there that need these resources and need to be able to feel empowered to get started and that they're not starting from scratch. So yeah, no, we're really excited to do more with the BRMA in this next year, and couldn't be bigger supporters.
Yeah,
That's good to
absolutely.
hear. I was
Mhm.
curious, and it just myself having worked at Expedia, it's really like, I think that having the channels be part of the conversation is really important. And I think they've taken a
Mhm.
really strong stance in being part of the conversation and not being kind of a bystander or letting it happen. And so I'd love to hear, like, what you guys are doing, not just with Expedia, but with other channels. Cause I think Alex and I have been started something just by happenstance through a conversation with a guest a while back, the hashtag we're not Airbnb. And it wasn't about putting the channel down. It was just that because people talk about vacation rentals and short-term rentals and call all of it an Airbnb, the brand is an Airbnb. And then when something bad happens, it's like, oh, did you see what the Airbnbs are doing? And so all of a sudden it becomes, like you said, what happened in the house next door to the neighbor becomes a reality, and it becomes the reality everywhere because it's labeled an Airbnb. And so, we've been very big proponents of having the channels be part of the conversation. So I love that Expedia is involved in it, but I don't see the other ones as much. So I don't know, like, are you having interactions and conversations with other channels that are, around vacation? I mean, anybody that's dabbling in vacation rentals, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. So the way that, and this is your question, but just adding more, another layer to it. The way that Rent Responsibly makes its money is a couple different channels, but one channel is through our partnerships. So it's organizations like Expedia Group, Verbo. The other ones are Key Data, Proper Insurance, Breezeway, GovOS, NoiseAware, D-Travel, Operto, and Wheelhouse. And so they're all partners with Rent Responsibly and believe in the work that we're doing, that if we're not helping empower advocates to get organized and affect change, that the industry is going to suffer. And
Yeah.
the industry will begin to shrink, and we'll see more restrictive bans be passed on short-term rentals. And so it's wonderful to have these organizations as partners because they all in turn become advocacy, I'd say advocacy tools.
Mhm.
If it's proper insurance, like making sure you have the right insurance for your property so that if something happens, you're not, being, you don't burn down your neighbor's place, God forbid, and you don't have the right insurance. Like,
Right.
be responsible about your safety and your home coverage. Same with Breezeway, or like leveraging noise aware. So you have technology that can detect noise before your neighbor hears it. Like all of that is considered like advocacy tech.
Mhm.
And so we love our partnership with Verbo. But we've heard things about like, oh, do your partners get to tell you where you work or how you support communities? And no, like the way in which we're working with an organization on Hilton Head Island. Drew Brown is one of the president of that group. And there were some questions about, are you pushing Expedia Group's agenda when you're working with these local groups? And absolutely not. Like, I would
Yeah.
love to go on the record and make that super clear. We're empowering the local leaders to say, what do we want? What can we live with? What works with our model? What can we not live with? Like what makes the most sense about our community in order for us to figure out what our path forward is. And so I love that because I couldn't ever be a puppet for a
Mhm.
big organization. I couldn't ever do something as an outsider for a community that I thought was best. The best I can do is say, hey, this is what we've seen work and not work in other communities that you might say are comparable. But they are simply supporters of the overall mission of what we're doing. And then, the other booking platforms, we have a relationship with Booking, and we have a relationship with Airbnb. We work a little bit less with Airbnb. We have a lot of opportunities to help communities grow through our partnership with Verbo, but they're all participating and all helping spread the word and promoting these local alliances and ensuring that there's good outcomes where there's big events like the Super Bowl this upcoming weekend.
Sure. That's good to hear, because I think that, again, it's about education, and the more people that are in the room to have the conversation, the better off everybody's going to be, because then the right information is getting out to the people instead of
Mhm.
this, game of telephone. I heard. And by the time you get to the 10th person who's making the rules, it's not even anywhere near what the
Right.
problem actually was.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good point. Yeah, communication is normally the root of the problem and the answer to the problem.
Yeah.
So,
Well
yeah.
said.
Yeah. So what's next for this year, Dana? I mean, what would your goals be for looking back when we have you back on the show, maybe in December? What's something that you want to accomplish this year?
Well, I'm really excited. Something not to do with Rent Responsibly, but to do with the
Sure. Yeah,
podcast.
personal and professional.
Yeah.
Yeah. You have a lot going
Yeah.
on.
So with my podcast, How to Save Your Vacation Rental Business, that I do with Matt Landau, produced by Stuart Huber, we are rounding up on the last couple episodes of season 3. And this third season is all about creating a scorecard for operators to grade a destination as far as like the viability as, a sustainable destination for a short-term rental business to
Oh,
exist.
good. Yeah.
I think I see on, social media platforms about folks that are saying you can cash flow $6,000
Right. Yeah. Oh, yeah. We hate
a
that.
Oh,
week
yeah.
It drives us nuts.
on your
Yeah.
Airbnb, and they're not
Yeah.
saying short-term rental. And I'm like,
The get rich quick guys.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
Yeah.
you're the ones that are hurting the industry for everybody
Right.
else.
Exactly.
And so we really wanted to make a podcast that brings up the areas that are not traditionally part of like a spreadsheet analysis of like, okay, how's the supply? How's the demand? Maybe they'll look at regulations a little bit, but not really. So we're going way further and more in depth to evaluate, does a local alliance exist? Do they have relationships with policymakers? Are they hosting events? Are they getting in the news? And some factors that take a little bit more work to harvest that data. But the idea is for just to bring awareness about like what people's involvement and engagement is in their local community. And so really excited to see that season wrap up, and who knows if we'll do a season 4. Each time the season's wrapped, we've always been like, okay, that was it, we're done, right? And then we come up with
Yeah.
an idea for
Yeah.
our next season. They're always really thematic. But with Rent Responsibly, what I'm really excited about is we, over the last 3 years, have just been growing our library and growing our skill set and our knowledge about what communities need and how we can make their lives easier in the sense of like an advocacy, leadership, and alliance perspective. And so we've been designing software that is going to be a community hub. It's called Calm Hub. And so it's a place that local stakeholders and members of an alliance can log in. They can have access to each other. They have access to partner perks and benefits, discussion forums, educational modules and resources, compliance checklists. Like the one of the most kind of like surprising things I think I've discovered is that people want to be in compliance if they know what the legislation
Right. Yeah.
Mhm.
they
Yeah.
understand the rules, they want to follow it. So when you see low compliance in a destination, it's not because people don't want to follow the rules, it's because they just don't actually understand. And so it's like you said, Annie, there's like an education opportunity or an information gap.
Yeah.
So this Calm Hub is going to have a lot of tools, checklists, and resources and guides for folks to be able to ensure that they're in compliance. And so I'm really excited for us to launch that and get to work with communities where they know that they need to get organized. Like nothing gives me more satisfaction than having folks say when they fill out like a form on rentresponsibly.org saying, we don't have regulations yet, but I know they're coming and I want to see what I can do now to get organized.
Yeah, that's
And I'm
great.
Yeah.
like, these are like
Yeah.
the little victories of like, oh my God, okay, the message is getting out there and people are trying to be proactive. Like nothing makes my heart sing more than that. So I'm excited to be able to work and get these alliances into our system and be able to support them at a larger scale than we have over the last couple of years as we've been building out these resources.
Yeah.
That's a
Awesome.
lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's such great work. And, I
Yeah.
think our industry, we're very grateful for what you do and what the whole team does there. So keep it up. We're making an impact, and you're certainly making a huge impact. And it's just about communication and keeping that message out there and, keep beating the drum.
Exactly. And I think making sure people understand that there's like benefits beyond just fighting for the regulation, that it can bring you closer to your community. You can create
Yes, definitely.
relationships. We really do have fun with it. I mean, people often think of the A word as like advocacy as snooze fest, but we actually have
Yeah.
fun
Right.
with it.
Yeah.
And then you can grow your business. Like, John Hildebrand is a dear buddy
Great
of
example. Yeah.
and he,
Yeah.
and he was already like in that influencer status with his YouTube channel, but he's just taken a whole new tone on of advocacy and regulations and bringing the community together. And he's just anyone that I've worked with now has had the opportunity to like network with new faces and meet new people
Yeah.
and really grow their business if they're in a position to want to grow. And so that's one of the satisfying things that I'm excited to see more groups step into and realize it's beyond just like the fear factor of their business being impacted. It's like the opportunity factor in 2023.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had John on recently, and I was actually going to bring him up because I think he's a great example of what kind of the nudge that you guys can give people to push them in. Because he was already, like you said, he was already influencing conversations. He was right there. And I remember he said, yeah, Dave came to me and said, you should do this. And he's like, oh, no, not me. And it was like,
Yeah.
oh,
Yeah.
yes, you, totally.
Yes,
And
you.
he's completely taken it on as like this like
He's doing
personality
great.
trait. And he's doing
Yeah.
amazing work. He's
Yeah.
just an amazing steward for the business and for the industry and, for his destination. And I think, again, he just needed somebody to kind of give him like the balance that he could do it and not, I think he was doing so many different things and he was just trying to grow his business, but he knew he needed to be part of the conversation and he was having the conversation, but just didn't have the comfort level to get out in the front of it. And I think that Dave and your team was able to kind of give him the floaties to get out there and do it and not feel like he was going to drown.
Yeah. And that's like the biggest thing I would say to anyone that's like, okay, we hear Dana and team talking about getting involved and becoming an advocate and starting a group. And then people are like, I'm in property management. I'm not like in politics. Like this isn't necessary. This is like, I couldn't do this. And you don't have to know how to do it. Like just to know that you have a voice and that politicians work for you and that like will help you with the rest of it. It's like, you don't have to be an expert to be able to get involved and make change. So that would be something I'd love to leave folks with.
Yeah, absolutely. Making advocacy fun again.
Who knew?
Yeah. Well, Dana, if anybody wants to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to reach out?
You can email me at dana@rentresponsibly.org.
Awesome. Okay. And the website obviously is rentresponsibly.org. And if anybody wants to contact Annie and I, you can go to alexandanniepodcast.com. And until next time, thank you, everybody.